My 5-year-old daughter and I were shivering under the awning of a downtown Atlanta family shelter when a black Maybach pulled up to the curb. The tinted window rolled down to reveal my wealthy grandmother, whom I thought was vacationing in Europe. She stepped out into the freezing rain, looked at our soaking wet clothes, and asked a question that stopped my heart. "Kiara, why on earth are you and my great-granddaughter standing outside a shelter instead of living in your mansion on Hawthorne Street?" I pulled my shivering daughter closer to my chest, completely stunned, and whispered, "What house?" I had no idea that this single question would unravel a multi-million-dollar web of deceit and give me the ultimate weapon to destroy the people who put us on the street. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to fight back against toxic family members who tried to bury you. You will definitely want to stick around to hear how I used my professional skills to take back exactly what was mine. My name is Kiara, and I am 28 years old. In the elite African American circles of Atlanta, Georgia, my family name commands instant respect. My grandmother, Constance Washington, is a legend. She built a massive cosmetics and beauty supply empire from the ground up, specifically catering to women of color across the South. She is a powerhouse, a matriarch, whose mere presence dictates the temperature of any room she enters. But beneath the polished veneer of generational wealth and country club memberships, my family harbored a rotting core of vanity and greed. That rot mostly resided in my mother, Vivian. Vivian Washington cared about exactly two things in this world: status and appearances. She spent her days organizing charity galas she barely cared about, and her evenings rubbing elbows with the city elite. To my mother, I was the ultimate stain on her perfectly curated life. I was not interested in social climbing or marrying into a legacy family. Instead, I pursued a career as a forensic accountant. I spent my days tracking black money, uncovering corporate fraud, and following digital paper trails for law enforcement. My mother considered my profession tedious and working class. Her disdain for me only intensified when I chose to become a single mother to my beautiful daughter, Nia. To Vivian, a child without a wealthy father in the picture was a social liability. My younger sister, Jada, on the other hand, was our mother-perfect little princess. Jada was 25, incredibly beautiful and dangerously manipulative. She played the social game flawlessly, eventually marrying Connor Sterling, a 29-year-old white venture capitalist who loved dropping my family name to impress his wealthy investors. Connor was arrogant, flashy, and constantly boasted about his latest acquisitions. My mother worshipped him simply because his presence looked good in her country club photos and elevated her status among her superficial friends. Because I refused to play their games, I was gradually pushed to the fringes of the family. I did not mind the distance until my consulting firm downsized and I lost my job. As a forensic accountant, finding a new position usually takes time, and my emergency savings were quickly depleted by nigh sudden medical expenses for a severe asthma condition. I found myself in a terrifying position. I was completely out of money, the rent was due, and I needed exactly $2,000 to cover Nia preschool tuition and keep our small apartment. I swallowed every ounce of my pride and went to my mother house to ask for a short-term loan. It was a Tuesday night, and a massive thunderstorm was rolling through Atlanta. I stood in the grand foyer of my mother's sprawling estate, dripping rain onto her imported marble floors. I laid out my situation, explaining that it was only a temporary loan and that I would pay her back with interest as soon as my new contract started. Vivian did not even offer me a towel. She simply stood there, swirling her expensive red wine, looking at me with pure disgust. "You are a failure, Kiara," she told me, her voice echoing in the grand hallway. "You chose to ruin your life by having that child out of wedlock. You chose a boring job. And now you have the audacity to bring your mess into my home and ask for handouts." I begged her. I explained that Nia needed a safe place to sleep and that we were facing eviction. Jada and Connor were sitting in the adjacent living room, watching the whole scene unfold. Connor actually chuckled while Jada sipped her drink, completely indifferent to her own niece suffering. My mother stepped closer to me, her eyes cold and empty. You are a grown woman, she sneered. I am not funding your poor life choices. Get out of my house before you stain the rugs any further. Do not bring that fatherless child back here to embarrass me again. She literally pushed me out the front door and slammed it in my face. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, locking me out in the pouring rain. I walked back to my cheap apartment completely shattered. 3 days later, the eviction notice was enforced. With nowhere else to go and no money for a hotel, I packed what little we could carry into 2 trash bags. I held Nia's hand as we walked toward a family shelter in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city. The rain had returned a freezing downpour that soaked through our thin jackets. My daughter was crying quietly, asking why we could not sleep in her bed tonight. My heart shattered into a million pieces. I felt like the worst mother in the world. I had failed to protect my child from the harsh realities of a world that did not care about us. We finally reached the shelter, only to find a line of people waiting outside. The facility was over capacity, and we had to wait under a leaky awning hoping a bed would open up. I wrapped my arms around Nia, trying to shield her from the biting wind. I felt so incredibly small, so entirely defeated. I had spent my life analyzing financial records and finding hidden assets for other people, but I could not even put a roof over my own daughter's head. That was when the headlights cut through the heavy rain. A sleek black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the curb, splashing water onto the cracked pavement. I recognized the license plate immediately, but my mind refused to process it. My grandmother Constance was supposed to be on a 2-month luxury cruise through Europe. She had been gone for weeks, and my mother had explicitly told me not to bother her with my trivial problems. The rear door of the Maybach opened, and a security guard stepped out, holding a large umbrella. Then my grandmother emerged. Even at 75 years old, Constance Washington moved with an intimidating grace. She wore a tailored wool coat, and her sharp eyes immediately scanned the miserable crowd outside the shelter until they landed on me. The color drained from her face. She rushed over to us, ignoring the puddles that ruined her expensive shoes. "Kiara," she gasped, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and fury. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you and my great-granddaughter standing outside a shelter in the middle of a storm? Why are you not living in your mansion on Hawthorne Street?" I stared at her, the freezing rain dripping from my eyelashes. I pulled Nia tighter against my chest, my mind struggling to comprehend her words. "What house?" I whispered, my voice cracking. My grandmother's face hardened into a mask of pure, cold rage. "The $3 million estate I bought for you and Nia 3 years ago," she stated clearly. "The one I handed the deed to your mother to give to you." The world around me seemed to stop spinning. The sounds of the rain, the traffic, the crying children all faded into a deafening silence. My mother had not just refused to help me. She had actively stolen my home. She had watched me beg for $2,000 to keep my child off the streets, knowing full well she had stolen a multi-million-dollar property that belonged to me. In that exact second, the broken, weeping victim inside me died. I was no longer the helpless daughter begging for scraps of affection. I was a forensic accountant. I tracked stolen assets for a living. I dismantled financial criminals for breakfast. And my mother had just committed wire fraud, forgery, and grand theft against her own flesh and blood. I looked at my grandmother, a new fire igniting in my chest. "I think we need to look at some public property records," I told her. The storm was just beginning, but this time, I was not going to be the one left standing in the rain. The camera tracks tightly over my right shoulder, moving in perfect rhythm with my rapid footsteps as I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Fulton County Public Library. My clothes are still completely soaked from the freezing Atlanta rain, but I do not feel the cold anymore. My grandmother, words are a looping siren in my mind. "The $3 million estate I bought for you and Nia. The one I handed the deed to your mother to give to you." I march past the fiction aisles and the quiet reading areas, heading straight for the public access computer terminals in the back. As a forensic accountant, I have spent my entire professional life hunting down ghosts in financial statements, tracing laundered money through complex shell companies, and finding hidden assets that arrogant criminals thought were buried deep underground. Now, for the first time in my career, I am hunting my own family. I slide into a hard plastic chair and wake up the monitor. The harsh fluorescent library lights reflect off the screen, illuminating the tense lines forming on my face. My fingers fly across the sticky keyboard, accessing the Fulton County Real Estate Tax Assessor database. It is a public portal, but navigating it effectively requires knowing exactly which property identification numbers and transfer codes to pull. I bypass the basic search functions and dive straight into the historical deed transfers for the prestigious Hawthorne Street neighborhood. The system prompts me for a specific address or a parcel number. I type in the street name and cross-reference it with the public filings of my grandmother holding company. The loading icon spins in the center of the screen. Each rotation feels like a heavy hammer striking an anvil inside my chest. Then the official record populates. The camera crash zooms directly onto the glowing monitor, filling the entire frame with black text on a stark white background. Hawthorne Estate Parcel 402. Original purchase date exactly 3 years ago. The purchaser listed on the original warranty deed is the Constance Washington Trust, with the intended beneficiary clearly named as Kiara Washington. A cold sweat breaks out across the back of my neck. It was real. The house was real. The safety and financial security I had been desperately begging the universe for, while working minimum wage consulting gigs just to buy asthma medication for my little girl, had existed all along. But the screen shows a second transaction, a quitclaim deed filed just 2 weeks after the original purchase. The current registered owners of the Hawthorne estate are not Kiara Washington. The names glowing back at me in bold letters are Jada Sterling and Connor Sterling. I pull up the scanned PDF of the transfer documents. The camera shifts, catching the exact moment my expression morphs from stunned disbelief into a quiet, lethal rage. I stare at the signature line at the bottom of the page. There, printed in black ink, is my name, Kiara Washington, but it is absolutely not my handwriting. The loop on the K is too sharp. The slant of the W is completely wrong, and the pressure of the pen strokes is entirely too heavy. It is a forgery, and it is not even a sophisticated one. It is an arrogant, sloppy forgery executed by someone who believed I would be too poor, too beaten down, and too insignificant to ever demand a legal audit of my own life. They thought I would remain the quiet outcast of the family, forever ignorant of the millions stolen right out from under me. My forensic training takes over, instantly replacing the raw sting of betrayal with pure mathematical calculation. I zoom in on the notary stamp authenticating the fraudulent document. The notary is listed as Cynthia Vance, a woman who frequently plays tennis with my mother at the Buckhead Country Club. The entire picture clicks into absolute horrifying focus. My mother Vivian received the deed from my grandmother. Instead of handing it to me, she handed it to her precious golden child Jada and her flashy white venture capitalist husband Connor. Connor, needing a massive hard asset to bolster his fake investment portfolio, forged my signature. My mother facilitated the crime and her country club friend notarized it. They stole a $3 million mansion from a single mother and a sick 5-year-old child, so Connor could play pretend billionaire on Wall Street, and my mother could maintain her illusion of having a highly successful son-in-law. I am not done. I open a new tab and access the county lien and mortgage registry. If Connor Sterling is the financial fraudster I suspect he is, he would not just sit on a paid-off piece of real estate. He would leverage it. I type in his name and the property parcel number. The database takes a moment to process before spitting out a commercial loan agreement. My eyes scan the document, and my jaw clenches so tight my teeth ache. Connor used the stolen Hawthorne property as collateral to take out a massive line of credit. $2.5 million. He drained the equity of my house to fund his venture capital firm. My mother knew. Vivian Washington watched me stand in her grand foyer, dripping wet from the storm, begging for a $2,000 loan to keep her own granddaughter from sleeping in a homeless shelter. She looked me dead in the eye and called me a failure while knowing full well that her son-in-law was sitting on a $2.5 million credit line secured by my stolen house. She pushed me out into the freezing rain to protect a massive felony. I hit the print button, sending dozens of pages of deeds, lien records, and forged signatures to the library's shared printer. I walk over to the machine and gather the warm papers, stacking them neatly into a manila folder. I do not shed a single tear. Tears are for victims, and I am no longer a victim. I am the auditor of their destruction. Connor Sterling loves to brag about his self-made wealth and his brilliant investment strategies. He loves to look down his nose at me and tell me to buy diapers with his pocket change. He built his entire arrogant identity on a foundation of wire fraud, identity theft, and grand theft real estate. And Jada, my own sister, signed her name right next to his, claiming a home that my grandmother bought to keep my child safe. I slide the folder into my damp tote bag. The camera follows me from a low angle as I walk out of the library, the steady rhythm of my footsteps echoing absolute determination. They wanted me to be the family failure. They wanted me to stay at the bottom so they could stand on my shoulders and look down at me. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They stole from a forensic accountant. I know exactly how to trace every single penny they took. I know how to build an airtight case that no expensive defense lawyer can dismantle. I am not just going to take back the Hawthorne house. I am going to track down every dollar of that $2.5 million fraudulent loan. I am going to unravel Connor's entire venture capital firm. I am going to expose my Mother Country Club fraud. I am going to let them keep living their luxurious fake lives just a little bit longer, completely unaware that the ghost of Hawthorne Street is coming to collect every single debt with devastating interest. The camera tracks tightly behind my right shoulder in a smooth, continuous dolly movement as I step off the city bus at the edge of the Hawthorne neighborhood. I am wearing a generic brown delivery vest over my clothes, a clipboard tucked under my arm, and a matching baseball cap pulled low over my forehead. The pristine sidewalks of this ultra-wealthy district are a jarring contrast to the crumbling pavement of the family shelter I left behind just 24 hours ago. Tall, ancient oak trees cast long shadows over the manicured lawns, providing the perfect cover for my approach. As I draw closer to parcel number 402, the camera movement shifts. The smooth tracking dissolves into a handheld, slightly shaky perspective. It mimics the adrenaline rushing through my veins, creating a visceral, voyeuristic tension as I peer through the massive wrought iron gates of the estate. The $3 million property is breathtaking. It is a sprawling French provincial mansion with slate roofs, towering arched windows, and a wraparound driveway paved in custom stone. It is exactly the kind of sanctuary my grandmother would choose to keep my daughter safe. But the people occupying it have turned my sanctuary into a circus of vanity. I can hear her voice before I even see her. Jada is standing on the immaculate emerald lawn, her arm outstretched, holding her smartphone on a portable gimbal. She is wearing a silk designer sundress that easily costs a month of my rent. She is spinning in slow circles, framing the towering facade of the mansion behind her for her thousands of online followers. Her bright artificial laugh echoes across the driveway. "Welcome to our new estate, you guys!" Jada squeals into the camera, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing to the sweeping architecture. Connor and I just finished the landscaping for the East Wing, and it is absolutely giving old money luxury. It has been such an exhausting journey building this dream home, but hard work truly pays off. Make sure you swipe up to shop my look. Hard work. The words taste like bile in the back of my throat. The only hard work Jada ever did was practicing her signature so it looked legitimate next to my forged name on a fraudulent property deed. I grip the metal bars of the gate, my knuckles turning white under the heavy brown canvas of the delivery uniform. I shift my gaze to the sprawling stone patio attached to the side of the house. Connor is holding court exactly where I expected him to be. He is playing the brilliant young venture capitalist to absolute perfection. He wears a crisp white linen shirt and expensive Italian loafers, holding a crystal glass of amber liquor. He is entertaining three older silver-haired men in tailored suits. These are his investors. These are the men he needs to impress to keep his fraudulent Ponzi scheme afloat. He points to the vast expanse of the property, flashing his signature arrogant smile, clearly using the sheer scale of the estate as tangible proof of his financial genius. My forensic accounting brain automatically catalogs every item in my field of vision. The crystal decanter on the patio table is a $5,000 vintage. The designer patio furniture is easily $30,000. Jada outfit the luxury SUVs parked in the custom garage, the imported Italian cypress trees lining the walkway. I am not looking at a display of success. I am looking at a crime scene. Every single item I see is funded by the $2.5 million fraudulent credit line Connor took out against my stolen home. They are literally drinking my daughter's future. I press the intercom button at the main gate, holding up a medium-sized cardboard box with a printed barcode. The electronic lock buzzes loudly, and the heavy iron gates slowly swing open. The camera stays low, tracking my boots as I walk up the long, sweeping driveway. My heart pounds with a slow, heavy rhythm. I am not afraid. I am simply furious, and I am channeling every ounce of that fury into the careful execution of this reconnaissance mission. As I approach the wide stone steps leading to the main entrance, Connor spots me from the patio. He holds up an index finger to his wealthy investors, flashing them a charming, apologetic smile. "Excuse me for just one moment, gentlemen," he says, his voice dripping with faux professionalism. "The latest batch of truffles from Italy just arrived. I will be right back." He jogs down the side stairs and walks briskly toward the front porch, his posture radiating entitlement. He clearly does not want a lowly delivery worker interrupting the pristine aesthetic of his high society gathering. He stops at the top of the stone steps, looking down at me with an expression of mild annoyance. "Just leave it on the bench," he orders, waving his hand dismissively. I do not put the box down. I take one step up the stairs, closing the distance between us. I hold the electronic scanner out toward him. "I need a signature for the delivery, Mr. Sterling," I say, keeping my voice low and completely flat. Connor sighs, heavily irritated by the inconvenience of having to interact with the working class. He reaches down to grab the electronic pen from my hand. As he leans in, I tilt my head up, allowing the shadow of the brown cap to fall away from my face. My dark eyes lock directly onto his pale blue ones. The electronic pen slips from his fingers and clatters onto the stone porch. The charming smile instantly vanishes from his face, replaced by a sudden jolt of recognition. He takes a half step backward, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the patio, to ensure his wealthy investors are not watching. When he realizes they are engaged in their own conversation, his shock quickly morphs into pure, unfiltered arrogance. The mask of the brilliant venture capitalist drops, revealing the cruel, opportunistic parasite underneath. He steps down, bringing his face uncomfortably close to mine, so his voice will not carry across the lawn. "What the hell are you doing here, Kiara?" he hisses, his jaw clenched tight. I stare at him, my expression completely stoic. "Delivering a package," I reply smoothly. "I am making an honest living, Connor. You should try it sometime." His eyes narrow into malicious slits. He looks me up and down, taking in the cheap delivery vest, the faded jeans, and the heavy boots. He lets out a harsh, mocking scoff. "Look at you. You look like absolute trash. Vivian told me you were begging for money at her door like a stray dog. And now you are playing dress-up to stalk my house." He reaches into the pocket of his expensive linen trousers and pulls out a thick gold money clip bursting with $100 bills. He peels one crisp $100 bill from the stack. He does not hand it to me. He deliberately opens his fingers and lets the bill flutter down onto the wet stone between my boots. "Take it," he sneers, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. "Go buy some diapers for your fatherless kid, or maybe a hot meal. But do me a favor and do not ever show your face in this zip code again. My neighbors are Wall Street executives and legacy politicians. Having someone who looks like you lurking around my property lowers the neighborhood property value." The camera switches to a tight close-up of my face, capturing the intense, silent war raging behind my eyes. The old Kiara would have screamed. She would have thrown the box at his chest. She would have caused a massive scene screaming about the forged deed and demanding the police be called. But the forensic accountant knows better. Causing a scene now would only give him time to hide the money and destroy the financial evidence. He needs to believe he has won. He needs to believe I am utterly defeated. I do not argue. I do not raise my voice. I look down at the crisp $100 bill resting on the damp stone. Slowly, I bend my knees, keeping my back perfectly straight, and pick up the money. I brush a speck of dirt off Benjamin Franklin's face. I fold the bill neatly in half and slide it into the front pocket of my delivery vest. I stand back up and meet his gaze one final time. I look at him with the cold, dead-eyed stare of an apex predator mapping its prey. I am not looking at a brother-in-law. I am looking at a walking prison sentence. "Thank you for the generous tip, Mr. Sterling," I say, my voice chillingly calm. "Enjoy the house." I turn around and walk back down the long driveway, my boots crunching steadily against the gravel. The handheld camera follows me, shaking slightly to emphasize the raw power of the moment. Connor's arrogant laughter echoes behind me as he returns to his investors, completely oblivious to the reality of his situation. He thinks he just humiliated a desperate single mother. He has no idea he just handed a $100 down payment to the architect of his total annihilation. The underlying conflict has just breached the surface, and the countdown to his destruction has officially begun. The crisp $100 bill is pinned to the exact center of a massive glass whiteboard in the corner of my cramped living room. The camera executes a fast panning motion, whipping back and forth between my face and the glass surface. My eyes are dark and hyper-focused, tracking across a chaotic web of printed bank statements, tax filings, and corporate registration documents. I uncap a red, dry erase marker, the sharp chemical smell filling the small space. The humiliation from the iron gates of the Hawthorne estate has completely evaporated. Connor thought tossing a bill at my feet would break my spirit. Instead, it provided the exact focal point I needed to map his destruction. I draw a thick red circle around the $100 bill. That is Connor. Arrogant, flashy, and entirely counterfeit. The camera settles into an over-the-shoulder shot, positioning my silhouette in the foreground, while the glass board dominates the frame. The glow from my dual monitors reflects off the glass, bathing the complex financial diagrams in harsh light. The numbers glowing on the screen are entirely red. Negative balances, leveraged debt, phantom assets. I type furiously into my specialized forensic auditing software, running a deep background trace on Sterling Venture Capital Holdings. Connor presents himself to the world as a visionary tech investor, a man who spots the next big startup and turns millions into billions. But numbers have a beautiful, indisputable purity. They do not care about custom Italian loafers or French provincial mansions. They only tell the absolute truth. And the truth glowing back at me in stark red digits is that Connor Sterling is a financial parasite. I begin pulling the publicly available SEC Form D filings for his firm. These forms are required when a company raises capital from private investors. Connor claims to manage a portfolio worth $50 million. But as I cross-reference his registered corporate entities in Delaware with offshore banking routing numbers, the facade immediately begins to crumble. There are no tech startups. There are no innovative software companies receiving seed money. There is absolutely no legitimate revenue generation. I print the transaction ledgers and tape them to the glass board. I draw a sharp red line from a newly formed shell company directly back to Connor personal accounts. The fast panning camera movement resumes, capturing the sheer velocity of my investigation. I am no longer a struggling single mother. I am a predator in my natural habitat. I track a wire transfer of $500,000 from an unknown private investor into Sterling Venture Capital. According to Connor glossy prospectus, that money was supposed to fund a medical technology firm. Instead, I follow the digital breadcrumbs as the funds are instantly fractured into dozens of smaller transactions. $100,000 goes directly to pay the monthly interest on the fraudulent $2.5 million loan he took out against my Hawthorne house. $200,000 is wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands to hide the origin. The remaining $200,000 is diverted to pay fake quarterly dividends to 3 different early investors. I stop writing and step back, letting the red marker hang loosely in my hand. The realization hits me with the force of a freight train. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is not even a particularly sophisticated one. It is a classic textbook pyramid of fraud. Connor is simply taking fresh cash from new investors and using it to pay off the old ones, creating the dazzling illusion of massive financial returns. But a Ponzi scheme requires a constant, aggressive influx of new cash to keep the house of cards from collapsing. He needed a prop. He needed a tangible, monumental asset to prove to his wealthy marks that he was a man of infinite means. That is why he needed the Hawthorne estate. My grandmother house was the ultimate theatrical prop. He used the forged deed to secure the initial line of credit, keeping his fake firm afloat just long enough to lure in bigger fish. I stepped closer to the board, my eyes scanning the names of the investors listed on the incoming wire transfers. If Connor is running a Ponzi scheme, he needs a steady supply of gullible, wealthy individuals who trust him implicitly. He needs people who will write $500,000 checks without demanding a rigorous independent audit. I pull up the digital archives of the Buckhead Country Club societal newsletter. My mother Vivian is practically the reigning queen of that specific circle. I cross-reference the names of Connor investors with the country club membership directory. The camera holds tight on my face, capturing a cold, terrifying smile forming on my lips. The over-the-shoulder shot reflects the names glowing in bright red ink on the glass board. Beatrice DuPont, Margaret Higgins, Eleanor Vance, Cynthia Vance. I tap the marker against Cynthia's name. Cynthia Vance is the notary who fraudulently authenticated the forged deed transferring my house to Connor and Jada. She is also listed as an angel investor in Sterling Venture Capital, receiving a guaranteed 20% return on her money. She did not just forge a document as a favor to my mother. She was bought off with stolen funds. Every single name on Connor investor list belongs to my mother inner circle. Vivian wealthy, elite country club friends. Vivian has been parading her handsome, successful son-in-law around her high society luncheons and charity galas. She has been actively leveraging her social capital to convince her richest friends to empty their investment portfolios and hand the cash over to Connor. She thinks she is the ultimate high society matriarch, bragging about her golden child Jada and her billionaire husband. In reality, Vivian is nothing more than an unpaid bird dog for a con artist, leading her closest friends directly into a financial slaughterhouse. The sheer scale of the betrayal is breathtaking. Vivian sold out her own daughter, stealing a home meant to secure her granddaughter's future, just to maintain the illusion of prestige. Now she is unwittingly serving up her entire social circle to fund a criminal enterprise. Connor is drowning in phantom debt. The red numbers on my monitors show the inevitable mathematical conclusion. The incoming investments are slowing down. The monthly interest payments on the Hawthorne loan and the fake dividends are vastly exceeding his cash on hand. The Ponzi scheme is weeks, maybe days away from a catastrophic implosion. I drag the red marker across the glass board, drawing a thick, heavy line connecting the forged Hawthorne deed directly to the country club investor list. The map of their destruction is complete. Connor told me I was lowering the property value of his neighborhood. He told me to go buy diapers with his discarded $100 bill. He thought poverty had made me stupid. He thought a lack of resources equated to a lack of power. But I possess the one weapon he entirely lacks. I possess the truth. I have the bank routing numbers. I have the shell company registrations. I have the digital fingerprints proving the forgery. I do not just have the power to take my house back. I hold the detonator to a financial nuclear bomb. When I release this audit, Connor will not just lose the house. He will face federal indictment for wire fraud, bank fraud, and running a Ponzi scheme. Jada will be implicated as a co-conspirator, and my mother Vivian will be publicly unmasked as the woman who brought a criminal predator into the sacred halls of the Buckhead Country Club, destroying the fortunes of every woman who ever trusted her. I turn off the monitors, plunging the room into darkness, save for the streetlights filtering through the blinds. The red lines on the glass board seem to pulse in the shadows. I fold the $100 bill and slip it into my wallet. It is not just money anymore. It is a receipt. The game has entirely shifted. They stole my peace and my property, but I'm about to steal their freedom, their reputation, and their entire fabricated reality. The audit is complete. It is time to initiate the collection. The heavy mahogany doors of my mother's dining room swing open. The camera begins a slow, relentless 360-degree pane circling the massive glass dining table. The lighting overhead is harsh and cold, casting sharp shadows that highlight the hollow tension in the room. The camera glides past my mother, Vivian. Her posture is rigid, her knuckles white as she grips her crystal wine glass. It pans over to Jada, who is aggressively scrolling through her phone, her face pinched with a superficial annoyance that barely masks her underlying panic. Connor is noticeably absent tonight. Finally, the rotating lens settles on me. I sit perfectly still, my hands resting on my lap, absorbing the desperate energy radiating from the two women across from me. I did not want to come here. But when Vivian summons you to a mandatory dinner with panic bleeding through her voicemails, you go. You go because a desperate fraudster is a careless fraudster, and as an auditor, I know that careless people always leave evidence in plain sight. Vivian takes a long, erratic sip of her wine. The vintage is wrong. My forensic eye catches the label instantly. Vivian usually pours a $200 Bordeaux for family dinners to maintain her manufactured aesthetic of generational wealth. Tonight she is pouring a $20 blend from a generic grocery store. I glance at her neck. The signature diamond tennis bracelet she has worn every day for the past decade is missing. In its place is a high-quality cubic zirconia replica. The clasp is slightly tarnished. She has been pawning her jewelry. Constance called Vivian, says her voice tight, vibrating with a frantic energy she is trying desperately to suppress. Your grandmother is hosting a formal gala this weekend at the country club. She expects the entire family to be in attendance. She specifically asked for you. The name hangs in the cold air. Constance. My grandmother. The woman who bought the Hawthorne estate to secure my future. The woman whose generosity they hijacked. Vivian is terrified. I can see the rapid pulse beating at the base of her throat. If I show up at that gala and speak to Constance, the entire illusion shatters. Constance is old, but her mind is a steel trap. If she asks me how I am enjoying the Hawthorne house and I tell her I am living in a subsidized apartment, the resulting detonation will obliterate Vivian's social standing permanently. Jada slams her phone face down on the glass table. The sharp crack echoes in the quiet room. You cannot go, she snaps, glaring at me with raw, undisguised venom. Look at you, Kiara. You are a complete mess. You will embarrass Connor in front of his investors. Half the country club has put money into his firm. If they see his sister-in-law looking like a charity case, it will completely ruin his brand. His brand. I stare at my sister, marveling at the sheer depth of her delusion. She actually believes the lie. She believes Connor is a financial genius who simply needs to maintain an aesthetic. She does not know about the forged deeds, the offshore wire transfers, or the pyramid scheme that is currently collapsing under its own massive weight. She is just a vapid accomplice, completely blind to the prison sentence hanging over her husband's head. But Vivian knows. The realization hits me with absolute crystalline clarity. I look at my mother, and the final pieces of the puzzle snap into place. Vivian is not just a passive enabler who turned a blind eye to a forged signature. She is actively participating in the cover-up, the cheap wine, the pawned diamonds, the frantic energy. Connor Ponzi's scheme is bleeding cash, and Vivian is desperately trying to plug the holes. I run the mental calculations, mapping out Vivian's personal assets against Connor escalating debt. The $2.5 million loan secured against my stolen house is not enough anymore. Connor needs constant capital to pay the fake dividends to his investors. Where is he getting the emergency cash to keep the scheme alive? I stare at my mother's hands. They are trembling. She has drained her own accounts. She is liquidating her personal retirement fund, the generational wealth my grandfather left her just to keep Connor's fraudulent venture capital firm afloat. She is bankrupting herself to protect a white con artist because the alternative is admitting to the Buckhead Country Club that her perfect high society daughter married a common thief. Vivian values the illusion of aristocratic prestige more than her own financial survival. She certainly values it more than her flesh and blood daughter. Vivian sets her glass down with a sharp clink. The camera completes another full rotation, locking back onto her strained face. Kiara, listen to me, she says, adopting a tone of patronizing authority that she has used to demean me since childhood. You do not belong at a gala like this. These are important people, people who understand wealth and business. You would be completely out of your element. You would just stand in the corner and make everyone uncomfortable. I remain absolutely silent. I let the silence stretch, stretching the tension until it feels like a physical weight pressing down on the glass table. Vivian shifts uncomfortably under my dead-eyed stare. She reaches down to the floor beside her chair and pulls up a crumpled plastic shopping bag. She tosses it across the smooth glass surface. It slides and stops inches from my hands. I look down. Spilling out of the plastic bag is a faded, shapeless gray dress. It looks like something pulled from the bottom of a donation bin. I found this in the back of my closet, Vivian says, her voice dripping with casual cruelty. It might actually fit you now. You can wear it to your little job interviews. But this weekend you are staying home. You stay put in your slum, Kiara. I will tell Constance you came down with a severe flu and could not risk infecting the guests. You will stay far away from the country club. Do you understand me? The audacity is breathtaking. She stole a $3 million estate from me. She facilitated the forgery of my signature. She pushed me and my sick 5-year-old daughter into the freezing rain. She is currently liquidating her entire net worth to protect a criminal. And now she is throwing a discarded rag at me, commanding me to hide in the shadows so she can continue to play the wealthy matriarch for the very people she is helping to defraud. The camera pushes in tight, dolly, and stopping just inches from my face. My features are perfectly still, a mask of complete emotional detachment. But slowly, deliberately, the corner of my mouth twitches upward. A faint, chilling smile breaks across my face. It is not a smile of submission. It is the smile of an executioner who has just secured the final signature on a death warrant. They have handed me the perfect stage. Constance Gala. The entire Buckhead Country Club will be there. Every single wealthy investor that Connor has defrauded. Every socialite that Vivian has lied to. The notary who authenticated the forged deed. They will all be gathered in one opulent room, drinking champagne and celebrating their imaginary wealth. They want me to stay hidden in the dark. They are terrified of what will happen if I step into the light. I reach out and place my hand flat against the crumpled gray fabric of the discarded dress. I look directly into Vivian's panicked eyes. My voice is soft, devoid of any anger, perfectly composed. Of course, Mother, I say. I would never want to embarrass the family. I will stay exactly where I belong. Vivian lets out a long, shuddering breath of relief. Her shoulders drop, the immediate crisis averted in her mind. Jada rolls her eyes and picks her phone back up instantly, dismissing me as the threat she feared I might be. They are so incredibly blind. They only see a defeated woman accepting a faded dress. They do not see the forensic accountant who has already mapped every single wire transfer offshore account and forged document in their miserable lives. I stand up from the table, leaving the plastic bag untouched. I do not say another word. I turn and walk out of the dining room, the heavy mahogany doors closing behind me. The cold lighting of the house fades as I step out into the warm evening air. I pull my phone from my pocket and open my encrypted cloud drive. The massive dossier of financial ruin is fully compiled. The bank statements, the tax records, the property deeds. It is all there, ready to be weaponized. I scroll to the digital invitation for the country club gala that I intercepted from Vivian's email earlier today. The event is black tie mandatory. I slide my phone back into my pocket. Vivian thinks I am going to stay in my slum. Connor thinks I am going to buy diapers with his discarded $100 bill. They have completely underestimated the ghost they created. I am going to that gala, but I am not wearing a faded gray dress, and I am certainly not going to stand quietly in the corner. I am going to burn their entire fabricated empire to the ground, and I am going to do it in front of every single person they ever tried to impress. The trap is fully set, and they are about to walk right into the flames. The camera drops low, instantly locking onto the rhythmic, sharp strike of my black leather boots against the sun-baked concrete. A tracking shot begins following me at pavement level as I stride down the bustling sidewalks of downtown Atlanta. The camera angle is deliberately angled upward, framing me against the towering steel and glass skyscrapers of the financial district. It is a power shot. It strips away the image of the vulnerable single mother in a faded delivery vest and replaces it with the cold, calculating precision of a woman walking to war. I am wearing a tailored black blazer over a crisp white shirt, my posture flawlessly straight. In my right hand, I carry a heavy reinforced leather briefcase. The sheer physical weight of the bag pulls slightly at my shoulder, but I do not switch hands. The weight is comforting. Inside that briefcase rests the absolute obliteration of Connor Sterling and the entire fraudulent reality my mother has desperately tried to protect. I do not look at the people passing by me. My vision is locked straight ahead, focused entirely on the brutalist concrete facade of the Richard B. Russell Federal Building rising in the distance. The camera pans up the sheer face of the federal structure, emphasizing its imposing, immovable authority. This is not a country club. This is not a society gala where smiles and expensive jewelry can buy compliance. This is the terminus for white-collar criminals. I reach the heavy glass doors and pull them open. The ambient noise of the Atlanta traffic is instantly cut off, replaced by the sterile, echoing acoustics of the federal lobby. The camera executes a smooth lateral track as I approach the security checkpoint. I place the heavy leather briefcase flat onto the X-ray conveyor belt. The security guard, a stern man in a gray uniform, watches the monitor as the bag slides through the scanner. He sees the dense blocks of paper, the perfectly aligned files, the USB drives containing the digitized evidence. He nods and pushes the bag down the metal rollers toward me. I take the handle, feeling the satisfying heft of it, and walk toward the elevator banks. The ride to the 14th floor is entirely silent. The camera remains fixed on my reflection in the polished steel of the elevator doors. My expression is a mask of pure, unadulterated focus. There is no hesitation. There is no lingering familial guilt. Vivian made her choice when she threw a discarded rag at me and ordered me to hide in the shadows. She chose the illusion. I am choosing the truth. The elevator bell chimes with a sharp, resonant ping. The steel doors slide open, revealing the sprawling active bullpen of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division. The atmosphere here is clinical and relentless. Phones ring incessantly. Agents move between desks carrying thick case files. The camera follows me as I navigate the maze of cubicles, completely ignoring the curious glances from junior analysts. I know exactly where I'm going. I have walked this specific floor before consulting as an independent forensic auditor on complex corporate embezzlement cases. I head straight for a corner office enclosed entirely in floor-to-ceiling glass. The nameplate beside the door reads Supervisory Special Agent Marcus Vance. I do not knock. I push the glass door open and step inside. Marcus is standing behind his desk, leaning over a sprawling schematic of bank routing numbers. He is a veteran investigator with sharp, observant eyes and a demeanor that actively repels small talk. He looks up, his brow furrowing in momentary irritation at the intrusion before recognition sets in. A genuine smile breaks across his face. Kiara, he says, standing up straight and tossing a pen onto his desk. I was wondering when you were going to resurface. The financial sector has been incredibly boring without you tearing corporate ledgers apart. I do not return the smile. I walk directly to his large mahogany desk and place the heavy leather briefcase squarely in the center of his polished workspace. The dull thud of the bag hitting the wood echoes in the quiet office. I need you to look at something, Marcus. I say, my voice perfectly flat and devoid of any social pleasantries. It is not a consultation. It is a federal felony submission. His smile vanishes instantly, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a seasoned investigator. He recognizes the tone. He knows I do not make dramatic statements without the empirical data to back them up. He gestures to the leather chair opposite his desk and sits back down. "Show me," he says. I unzip the briefcase and pull out the first stack of heavily annotated documents. The camera begins a slow creeping 360-degree pan around the desk, capturing the quiet intensity of the exchange. I slide a copy of the forged property deed across the mahogany surface. 2 months ago, a fraudulent warranty deed was filed in Fulton County. I begin pointing to the signature line. The property is a $3 million estate in the Hawthorne District. The deed transferred ownership from my name to a man named Connor Sterling and his wife Jada. The signature is a forgery. The notary who authenticated it is a woman named Cynthia Vance. Marcus examines the document, his eyes scanning the notary seal. Property fraud is a local jurisdiction issue, Kiara. You know the FBI does not typically handle domestic real estate disputes. I pull a second stack of papers from the briefcase. These are printed ledgers displaying massive columns of numbers. I slide them directly over the forged deed. The forgery was just the key to unlock the vault, I say, leaning forward. Connor Sterling used that stolen property as collateral to secure a $2.5 million commercial credit line from a regional bank. He then funneled that capital directly into a registered entity called Sterling Venture Capital Holdings. He presents it as a high-yield tech investment firm. I pull the thickest file from the bag, dropping it onto the center of the desk with a heavy thud. The camera pushes in tight on the label. It reads, Sterling VC Complete Audit. There are no tech investments, Marcus, I state, my voice dropping to a clinical whisper. It is a Ponzi scheme, a completely fabricated financial ecosystem. He is using the initial fraudulent credit line to pay out fake aggressive dividends to his early investors. Those early returns are being used as bait to lure in massive secondary capital. He is targeting high-net-worth individuals, specifically exploiting a wealthy country club social circle to drain their personal retirement accounts. Marcus opens the thick folder. The camera switches to a sharp over-the-shoulder perspective, looking down at the documents. Glowing red numbers and heavily highlighted bank routing codes dominate the pages. I have mapped the entire architecture of his fraud. I point to the top sheet, tracing the flow of capital with my index finger. Here is a $500,000 wire transfer from an elderly investor. Within 12 hours, that money is fractured. $100,000 goes to service the interest on his fraudulent bank loan, preventing a default on the stolen house. $200,000 is wired to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. He is actively hiding assets offshore, anticipating the collapse. The remaining capital is distributed to 3 different early investors, labeled as quarterly profit yields. He is literally paying Peter to rob Paul. Marcus flips through the pages, his eyes moving rapidly across the flowcharts and bank statements I spent the last 48 hours compiling. The silence in the glass office is profound, broken only by the sharp rustle of turning paper. He cross-references the offshore routing numbers with the domestic wire transfers. He sees the undeniable mathematical reality. The scheme is completely unsustainable, and the amount of stolen capital is staggering. You built a complete federal case matrix, he says, speaking more to the documents than to me. Wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, forgery. He looks up, meeting my eyes. The camera holds on his face, capturing his absolute serious realization of the scale. How much is the total exposure? Currently sitting at $8.5 million of stolen capital, I reply without blinking. But he is actively soliciting new investors this weekend. My grandmother is hosting a formal gala at the Buckhead Country Club. Every single wealthy target he has been grooming will be in attendance. He intends to use the event to secure another $3 million in fresh capital before the current dividend cycle defaults. Marcus closes the folder and rests his hands flat on top of the leather cover. He looks at me, his gaze piercing. Cynthia Vance, the notary who stamped the forged deed. She is listed here as one of his primary investors, receiving a guaranteed 20% return. She was bought off, I say, my voice dropping to a colder register. She facilitated the initial property theft in exchange for a position at the top of the pyramid. My mother Vivian is acting as his primary social liaison, leveraging her generational status to bring these investors directly to his table. She knows the firm is bleeding cash, and she is currently liquidating her own assets to cover his margins, protecting her social standing at the cost of federal crimes. The camera executes a fast, aggressive push into Marcus' face. The legal trap has officially snapped shut. The heavy gears of the federal justice system are engaging. I am not going to confront him at that gala, Marcus. I say, my dark eyes locking onto his. I am not going to scream or throw a drink or cause a high society scandal. I am going to put on a dress. I am going to walk into that ballroom. And I am going to stand there quietly while the Federal Bureau of Investigation kicks the doors off the hinges and puts Connor Sterling in handcuffs in front of every single person he ever lied to. Marcus slowly nods, his jaw tight with professional anticipation. He picks up his desk phone. I will brief the assistant director immediately, he says. We will have a financial strike team assemble the arrest warrants and asset freeze orders by tomorrow morning. I stand up from the leather chair, picking up my empty briefcase. I do not thank him. We both know the math is flawless. I turn and walk out of the glass office, the camera tracking my movement as I leave the bullpen. The trap is no longer just a concept mapped on a glass whiteboard in my living room. It is a federal mandate. The countdown has reached its final sequence and Connor Sterling is completely out of time. The camera executes a violent blurring whip pan, instantly bridging the distance between the sterile certainty of the federal building and the suffocating desperation of high society. The rapid lateral movement stops abruptly, framing Jada standing inside the most exclusive designer boutique in the Buckhead shopping district. The lighting here is soft and deliberately flattering, reflecting off gilded mirrors and polished marble floors. Jada is holding a glass of complimentary champagne, her posture radiating the manufactured entitlement she has spent years perfecting. Draped over the marble sales counter in front of her is a breathtaking custom-beaded evening gown, selected specifically to outshine every other woman at Constance's upcoming gala. The sales associate, a young woman with a practiced, deferential smile, taps the price into the register. $12,400. Jada does not even blink. She carelessly tosses a heavy black titanium credit card onto the counter. The associate slides the card through the gleaming terminal. A sharp synthetic beep cuts through the ambient classical music playing in the boutique. Declined. The word flashes in stark digital letters across the terminal screen. The sales associate's smile falters for a fraction of a second before her professional training kicks back in. She discreetly clears the screen. I am sorry, Mrs. Sterling, she says, lowering her voice to a sympathetic whisper. It seems the bank is blocking the transaction. Would you like to try a different card? Jada's face tightens, her perfectly contoured features hardening into a mask of pure indignation. It is a fraud alert, she snaps, snatching the titanium card back. My husband's firm moves millions of dollars a day. The bank algorithm always flags these trivial personal purchases. She reaches into her designer purse and pulls out a secondary platinum card, slapping it onto the marble. Use this one. The associate swipes the second card. Another sharp beep. Declined. The ambient noise in the boutique seems to vanish, leaving only the oppressive silence of sudden, undeniable humiliation. Two other wealthy patrons browsing a rack of silk blouses turn their heads slightly, their eyes locking onto Jada. The social currency in Buckhead is entirely visual, and a declined card is the ultimate public execution. Jada neck flushes a deep, mottled red. She grabs her purse, her manicured hands trembling with a mixture of rage and mounting panic. Their system is clearly malfunctioning. Jada hisses, glaring at the associate as if the young woman had personally insulted her. Hold the dress. I will have my husband assistant wire the funds directly from the firm. She turns on her heel and marches out of the boutique, leaving her half-empty glass of champagne sweating on the counter. The tracking camera follows her rapid, unsteady strides out onto the sunlit pavement. She pulls out her phone, dialing Connor number with furious, aggressive jabs of her thumb. The camera whip pans again, a dizzying horizontal blur that crashes through the city geography, landing violently in the dark wood-paneled study of the Hawthorne estate. Connor is not answering his phone. It vibrates aggressively on his messy desk, burying itself under a chaotic pile of past due notices and legal demands. Connor is ignoring Jada calls because he is currently fighting a war on a completely different front. He is pacing the length of his expensive Persian rug, sweating through a wrinkled linen shirt. The charming, arrogant venture capitalist, who held court on the patio just days ago, has completely evaporated. His hair is unkempt, his eyes bloodshot and frantic. He is holding a landline phone tightly against his ear, listening to the cold, unwavering voice of Beatrice DuPont. Beatrice is one of the foundational pillars of the Buckhead Country Club, and more importantly, she is the largest single investor in Sterling Venture Capital. "I need the $500,000 withdrawn by the end of the business day, Connor," she says, her tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. "I am closing on a commercial property in Savannah tomorrow morning, and I am liquidating my short-term yields to cover the down payment. You promised a 48-hour liquidity window when I signed the initial investment contract. I expect the wire transfer in my account by 5 o'clock. Connor wipes a sheen of cold sweat from his forehead. He forces a laugh, trying desperately to summon his signature charisma. "Beatrice, of course," he says, his voice shaking slightly. "But you are pulling out right before the tertiary dividend yield. We are about to finalize the acquisition of that medical tech startup. Your $500,000 is going to double in the next 30 days. It is bad business to pull the capital right before the harvest." "I do not care about the harvest," Connor, Beatrice replies, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "I care about my real estate closing tomorrow. Send the wire, or I am calling my attorneys and having them audit your firm directly." The line goes dead. Connor lowers the phone, his hands trembling uncontrollably. A forensic audit by external lawyers would instantly expose the empty accounts, the forged collateral, and the entire Ponzi structure. He slams his fist onto the desk, sending a stack of fake prospectus folders cascading to the floor. He has no liquidity. The fraudulent accounts are completely drained. The new investments he anticipated bringing in at the upcoming gala are still 3 days away, and Beatrice is demanding $500,000 by 5 o'clock today. The house of cards is actively collapsing around him. He picks up his vibrating cell phone, ignores Jada's 5 missed calls, and frantically dials the only person left who can blindly bail him out. He dials Vivian. The camera executes a third violent whip pan, tearing across the wealthy suburbs and slamming to a halt inside the sterile, heavily secured back room of a discreet private jeweler in downtown Atlanta. Vivian sits rigidly in a high-backed leather chair, her posture defensively straight. Across from her, a jeweler with a thick magnifying loupe screwed into his eye is meticulously examining the Washington family heirloom diamond necklace. Vivian looks physically ill. Her face is pale and her eyes dart nervously toward the locked door, as if terrified one of her country club peers might walk in and catch her in this act of absolute desperation. When Connor called her begging for an immediate emergency bridge loan to cover a temporary liquidity gap, she did not ask questions. She did not demand to see his balance sheets. She simply panicked. The thought of Beatrice DuPont exposing Connor as a fraud would instantly destroy Vivian's reputation. The illusion of her high society superiority is the only thing keeping her alive, and she will sacrifice anything to preserve it. The jeweler lowers the loupe and places the heavy diamond necklace onto a velvet tray. "They are excellent stones, Vivian," he says, his voice practiced and entirely devoid of emotion. "But the market for vintage cluster pieces is soft right now. I can give you $150,000 for the necklace and another $50,000 for the Cartier watch you brought in. $200,000 total, cash wire transferred immediately." Vivian grips the arms of her chair. The necklace alone was appraised at $400,000 just 3 years ago. She is taking a catastrophic loss. She is willingly allowing herself to be robbed because the alternative is social annihilation. She swallows hard, her throat dry. "Wire the money to this account," she says, sliding a slip of paper with Connor banking routing number across the table. "And do it quickly." The camera executes one final slow, deliberate whip pan, gliding away from the jeweler's sterile back room and settling into the cool, quiet atmosphere of my living room. I am sitting perfectly still in my desk chair, bathed in the blue glow of my dual monitors. I am not frantic. I am not sweating. I am experiencing the cold, absolute calm of a predator watching its prey step willingly into a steel trap. My customized tracking software is actively monitoring the financial arteries of Sterling Venture Capital. A bright green notification flashes across my left monitor. An incoming wire transfer of $200,000 from a private jewelry brokerage directly into Connor Primary Holding account. I watch the digital numbers update. Less than 30 seconds later, another notification triggers. An outgoing wire transfer from Connor account routing the exact same $200,000 directly to Beatrice DuPont. It is a pathetic, inadequate band-aid slapped over a severed artery. Connor still owes Beatrice $300,000, and Vivian has completely exhausted her personal liquid assets to buy him a few more hours of borrowed time. They are bleeding themselves dry, scrambling to maintain a facade that I have already structurally demolished. I turn away from the monitors and look toward the corner of my living room. Hanging from the top of the door frame is a heavy black garment bag. I stand up and walk toward it, unzipping the thick canvas with a smooth, steady motion. Inside hangs a flawless floor-length evening gown. It is deep emerald green, tailored with surgical precision. It is not a faded gray dress pulled from a donation bin. It is the armor of a woman who is about to command the absolute attention of every person in the Buckhead Country Club. Vivian ordered me to stay hidden. She ordered me to accept my place in the dirt so her fraudulent empire could continue to shine. I reach out and brush my fingers against the cool silk of the gown. The panic currently tearing through their lives is just a quiet prelude. In 3 days, I am going to walk into Constance Gala. I am going to stand under the crystal chandeliers, and I am going to watch the federal agents drag my sister and her husband out of that ballroom in chains. The bubble has not just burst, I have rigged it to explode. The camera begins a slow, deliberate backward dolly movement, pulling away from me in a smooth, continuous motion. The pacing is intentionally languid and measured. It creates a stark visual contrast to the absolute frantic chaos that is about to erupt through the digital airspace. I am sitting at the small wooden table in my apartment, bathed in the soft golden light of the late afternoon sun. A steaming mug of chamomile tea rests on the table in front of me. The warmth radiates against my palms. The heavy black leather briefcase from the federal building sits empty on the floor nearby, its purpose completely fulfilled. I bring the ceramic mug to my lips and take a slow, appreciative sip. The apartment is perfectly silent. It is the deep, settling quiet of a woman who has already won the war and is simply waiting for the opposing army to realize they are dead. The silence is shattered by the harsh electronic vibration of my cell phone buzzing against the wooden table. The camera continues its slow retreat, keeping me perfectly centered in the frame. I do not flinch. I do not rush to pick it up. I lower my tea, gently letting the ceramic base clink softly against the wood. I glance down at the glowing screen. The caller ID displays Connor Sterling. The physical distance between us is perhaps 10 miles, but the psychological distance is a vast, impassable ocean. 2 days ago, he tossed a crisp $100 bill at my feet and commanded me to disappear. Today, he is calling me. The predator has suddenly realized he is trapped in the cage and he is blindly reaching for the very person he locked inside. I let the phone ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I let the anticipation stretch, allowing the sheer terror on his end of the line to marinate and multiply. On the 4th ring, I reach out and tap the green icon, sliding the phone across the table to activate the speakerphone. Kiara. His voice fills the quiet apartment. It is a spectacular auditory train wreck. Connor is attempting to project his usual arrogant, authoritative tone, but the foundation of his voice is completely crumbling. His vocal cords are tight, vibrating with a breathless, frantic energy. He sounds like a man who has been running at a full sprint and is desperately trying to hide his exhaustion. Hello, Connor. I say, my voice as smooth and placid as the surface of a frozen lake. Listen to me, he starts, rushing through his words with sloppy, aggressive haste. I am dealing with a massive liquidity event at the firm today. We are restructuring several of our high-yield real estate assets to free up capital for a major tech acquisition. It is standard venture capital maneuvering, but the bankers are being incredibly tedious about the paperwork. I take another slow sip of my tea. The camera pulls back further, revealing the stark simplicity of my apartment, a sharp contrast to the multi-million-dollar mansion he is currently pacing inside. I know exactly what he is doing. He is trying to sound important. He is trying to bury his absolute desperation under layers of meaningless financial jargon. There is no tech acquisition. There is only Beatrice DuPont and a lineup of furious wealthy investors demanding their stolen money back. He is out of cash. Vivian has pawned her last diamond. The Ponzi scheme has hit the impenetrable brick wall of mathematical reality. Connor clears his throat, an ugly, nervous sound. The administrative friction is specifically related to the Hawthorne property. He continues, his pace accelerating. There was a minor clerical error when the deed was transferred to Jada and me. The title insurance company is flagging a discrepancy with the initial filing. It is just bureaucratic red tape, but it is stalling a massive cash transaction I have scheduled for tomorrow morning. I need to liquidate the property immediately to close this secondary deal. The translation is beautifully simple. He found a shady buyer willing to pay cash for my stolen house. But even the shadiest real estate attorneys require a clean title to close a multi-million-dollar transaction. Connor forged my signature on the original warranty deed. A simple background check or a diligent title search would instantly reveal that the signature on file does not match my legal identity. The title is clouded. He cannot sell the house. He cannot access the millions he desperately needs to pay off his investors and keep himself out of federal prison. The very forgery he used to steal my home is now the exact mechanism locking him inside his own destruction. I need you to sign a property relinquishment authorization, Connor says, his voice dropping into a harsh, demanding register. It is a standard legal waiver. It just officially clears the clerical error and waives any residual claim you might technically have on the estate due to the filing mistake. I have the documents printed on my desk right now. I remain perfectly still. The camera continues its slow dolly backward, framing me as a small figure of absolute immense power within the quiet room. I will make it worth your while, Kiara, he says, his voice cracking slightly, betraying his mounting terror. I know you are struggling. I know things have been hard for you and the kid. If you sign this authorization today, I will personally write you a check for $10,000. You can get out of that miserable neighborhood. You can start fresh. But I need the signature right now. The buyer is threatening to pull the cash offer if the title is not cleared by close of business. $10,000. He is offering me $10,000 of my own stolen equity to save him from a federal indictment. He is begging. The brilliant venture capitalist, the master of the universe, the man who stood on a stone patio and mocked my poverty, is now fundamentally relying on my compliance to survive the day. He needs me to willingly sign away my family legacy so he can cover up his catastrophic crimes. The silence stretches across the phone line. It is heavy and thick, suffocating him. I can hear his ragged, uneven breathing through the speaker. I can hear the subtle click of a pen clicking repeatedly in the background, a nervous, uncontrollable habit. He is entirely at my mercy, and he does not even comprehend the true depth of his peril. He thinks he is just dealing with a title dispute. He has no idea the FBI financial strike team is currently organizing their raid protocols. I lean forward slightly, resting my elbows on the wooden table. I look directly at the phone as if I can see straight through the digital connection and into his bloodshot, panicked eyes. I let a small, genuine smile touch the corners of my mouth. It is the sweet, pristine taste of total, absolute vengeance. I am sorry, Connor. I say, my voice completely light, conversational, and entirely unbothered. I really am. But I do not have a car to drive there and sign the papers. The line goes completely dead silent. The sheer banality of my excuse, the absolute lack of urgency in my tone hits him like a physical strike. He is offering $10,000. He is facing the complete collapse of his entire world. And I am casually citing a lack of transportation as my reason for inaction. Are you out of your mind? He explodes, his voice shattering into a raw, hysterical scream that distorts the tiny speaker on my phone. Take a cab, take a bus. I will send a private black car to pick you up right now. I will pay you $20,000. You do not understand what is at stake here, Kiara. You have to sign this document today. His scream echoes off the walls of my small apartment. It is the sound of a man watching the walls of his reality crush inward. He is no longer negotiating. He is completely unraveling. I smile softly into the speaker, enjoying the frantic, chaotic symphony of his destruction. I am very busy today, Connor, I reply, my tone dripping with an icy, polite dismissal. Good luck with your administrative friction. I do not wait for his response. I reach out and tap the red icon, severing the connection. The frantic screaming is instantly replaced by the quiet hum of my refrigerator. The camera finishes its slow dolly movement, settling into a wide shot that captures the entire serene room. I pick up my ceramic mug and take another slow sip of chamomile tea. Connor Sterling is currently tearing his home office apart, completely unaware that my refusal to sign his fraudulent document was not an act of petty stubbornness. It was the final strategic lock snapping into place. He cannot sell the house. He cannot pay Beatrice DuPont. The Ponzi scheme has officially run out of oxygen. He believes he is fighting to save his fortune, but the truth is, he has already lost his freedom. The final spark has been thrown, and the explosion is now an absolute certainty. The camera does not rest. It transitions violently from the absolute silence of my apartment directly into a blinding, synchronized explosion of paparazzi strobes. A fluid, relentless Steadicam shot takes over, gliding inches above a pristine crimson carpet unrolled across the valet entrance of the Four Seasons Atlanta. There is not a single static frame in this sequence. The visual pacing is intentionally dizzying, capturing a world that is dazzling, rushed, and fundamentally fake. Flashing lights catch the sharp angles of arriving luxury vehicles, the gleam of heavy diamond necklaces, and the perfectly practiced smiles of the city's most elite figures. This is the Washington Family Heritage Fund Gala. It is the social apex of the season, a gathering of the most powerful and influential Black families in Atlanta. Mayors, federal judges, real estate tycoons, and legacy wealth heirs move fluidly through the grand double doors of the hotel. The camera weaves seamlessly through the crowd, following the rustle of imported silk and the sharp clinking of crystal champagne flutes. The atmosphere is saturated with the heavy scent of expensive floral arrangements and bespoke perfume. Every single detail is designed to project an impenetrable fortress of generational wealth and untouchable success. The Steadicam sweeps into the grand ballroom, capturing the sheer, staggering opulence of the event. Cascading arrangements of white orchids and weeping willow branches drip from the ceiling. A 12-piece jazz orchestra plays a smooth, vibrant tempo in the corner. Waitstaff in immaculate white jackets move in synchronized patterns, carrying silver trays loaded with beluga caviar and vintage champagne. It is a masterpiece of high society theater. The camera locates Jada holding court near the center ice sculpture. She is a vision of manufactured perfection. She is wearing a breathtaking custom silver beaded gown that catches every ambient light in the room, radiating absolute entitlement. She laughs, tossing her head back, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a state senator. She projects the flawless image of a woman who has never known a single day of struggle. No one looking at her would ever suspect the humiliating reality that occurred just 3 days prior. No one can see the panic she felt when her titanium credit card was declined. Tonight she is the undisputed princess of the Washington dynasty, wrapped in silver silk and blinding arrogance. Just a few feet away, the camera tracks Connor Sterling. He is working the room with the aggressive charm of a seasoned political candidate. He moves from cluster to cluster, shaking hands, gripping shoulders and flashing his brilliant white smile. He looks immaculate in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo. He is the very picture of the brilliant, dynamic venture capitalist bringing modern tech wealth into an old money family. But the camera pushes in slightly, breaking past the polished exterior to capture the micro-expressions of a man actively drowning. A thin sheen of cold sweat catches the light on his forehead. His eyes dart frantically around the ballroom, mapping the exits, scanning the crowd for the specific investors who are actively hunting him for their money. He is operating on pure adrenaline and sheer unadulterated terror. He knows his fraudulent empire is completely out of cash. He knows the offshore accounts are frozen by his own panic. He is smiling at a federal judge while internally calculating exactly how many hours he has left before the entire Ponzi scheme violently implodes. He is a dead man walking, but he is putting on the performance of a lifetime because tonight is his absolute last chance at survival. The camera glides away from Connor and locates the true architect of this elaborate illusion. Vivian Washington moves through the ballroom with the regal glide of a monarch. She is draped in a dark velvet evening gown, projecting absolute authority and maternal grace. She kisses cheeks, accepts compliments, and gracefully accepts the admiration of her peers. She is the matriarch, the guardian of the Washington legacy. Yet underneath the velvet and the practiced poise, Vivian is physically hollowed out by fear. The camera captures the slight tremble in her fingers as she grips her champagne flute. Her neck feels strangely bare without the heavy diamond heirloom necklace she was forced to pawn in a sterile back room to buy her son-in-law a few hours of grace. She is operating on the very edge of total social annihilation. She knows Connor Firm is bleeding. She knows the money is gone, but she refuses to accept defeat. Instead, she has engineered this entire lavish gala as a desperate final gamble. Vivian's master plan hinges entirely on one specific objective. She must formally legitimize Connor. She must elevate him in front of the entire city, transferring the undeniable weight of the Washington family name directly onto his shoulders. By publicly anchoring him to the family legacy, she intends to silence the whispered doubts of his investors, and more importantly, secure the ultimate prize. The Steadicam pans respectfully to the table of honor situated directly in front of the main stage. There, sitting with quiet dignity, is my grandmother, Constance. She wears a simple, elegant dress, her sharp, intelligent eyes taking in the spectacle of the ballroom. She is the true holder of the Washington fortune. The generational wealth that Vivian so desperately craves is locked safely behind Constance's signature. Vivian knows she cannot simply ask for the money. Constance is too shrewd, too protective of the family assets. The strategy tonight is a public ambush. Vivian intends to formally announce Connor Sterling as the newly appointed director of the Washington Family Investment Fund. It is a fabricated title, a ceremonial key designed to force Constance's hand. By making the announcement in front of the mayor, the judges, and the entire social registry, Vivian is manufacturing a scenario where Constance cannot refuse to hand over the family portfolio without causing a massive public scandal. Vivian is using the crushing weight of high society expectations to trap her own mother into funding Connor's fraudulent criminal enterprise. The jazz orchestra suddenly cuts the music. A melodic chime echoes through the ballroom, drawing the attention of the several hundred guests. The ambient chatter slowly fades into an expectant, respectful silence. The camera tracks Vivian as she glides gracefully up the steps to the main stage, stepping up to the polished silver microphone. The stage lights catch the artificial brilliance of her smile. She looks out over the sea of wealthy, powerful faces, her gaze briefly locking onto Connor, who stands near the front, radiating manufactured humility. Thank you all for joining us on this magnificent evening. Vivian begins, her voice smooth and echoing with practiced warmth. The Washington family has always believed that our true wealth lies not in our assets, but in our legacy. We believe in building the future while honoring the past. Tonight, we are gathered to celebrate the continued growth of that legacy. The crowd murmurs with polite approval. Jada beams, looking around the room to ensure everyone is watching her mother. Connor adjusts his tuxedo jacket, his heart hammering against his ribs. He is seconds away from securing the keys to a multi-million-dollar vault. As we look toward the future, Vivian continues, her voice rising with dramatic projection. We recognize the need for brilliant dynamic leadership. We need someone who understands modern markets but respects traditional family values. Someone who has already proven his exceptional financial acumen. She gestures gracefully toward the front row. It is my profound honor to formally announce the new director of the Washington Family Investment Fund, a man who has brought immense pride to this family, my son-in-law, Connor Sterling. The ballroom erupts into enthusiastic applause. The camera whips to Connor as he pastes on an expression of deep, humble gratitude. He begins to step forward, ready to ascend the stage, ready to claim the title that will save him from federal prison. He raises his hand to wave at the applauding crowd. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the grand ballroom swing open with a sharp, echoing crack that slices cleanly through the sound of the applause. The camera executes a rapid track backward, pulling away from the stage and rushing down the center aisle, coming to a hard, sudden stop at the entrance. The movement is jarring, instantly, shifting the focus of the entire room. I step across the threshold. I am wearing the flawless floor-length emerald green gown. The tailoring is sharp, the silhouette commanding and absolute. My posture is perfectly straight, my shoulders back, my chin leveled with cold, predatory precision. I do not look like a struggling single mother. I do not look like the discarded, forgotten mistake Vivian tried to bury. I look like the rightful heir to an empire arriving to reclaim her throne. The applause in the ballroom falters. It does not stop all at once, but ripples away in jagged, confused waves as the guests near the back turn to look at the entrance. The silence spreads through the room like freezing water. Whispers begin to ignite, passing rapidly through the crowd as the elite of Atlanta recognize the woman standing in the doorway. The camera pushes in tight on my face. My dark eyes bypass the hundreds of guests, ignoring the politicians and the socialites. My gaze cuts a straight, unbroken line directly to the main stage, locking onto Vivian's frozen, panicked expression. The smile has completely vanished from her face. Connor stands paralyzed at the bottom of the stage stairs, his hands still awkwardly raised in a wave, his bloodshot eyes widening in absolute terror. I do not say a word. I simply stand under the brilliant crystal chandeliers, the emerald silk of my gown pooling against the marble floor. I let the oppressive, deafening silence stretch across the ballroom. The velvet curtain has been violently torn down, and the final act is ready to begin. The camera instantly drops into a fluid, high frame rate slow-motion sequence. The harsh glare of the crystal chandeliers bends and fractures around me as I take my first deliberate step fully into the grand ballroom. The heavy emerald green silk of my haute couture gown flows around my legs like liquid glass, a masterclass in aggressive bespoke tailoring that commands the absolute center of the frame. It is a garment designed not just for elegance, but for warfare. But I am not walking alone. My right hand firmly holds the small, delicate fingers of my daughter Nia. The camera angle lowers slightly, capturing her transformation. She is no longer the frightened child shivering in a drafty apartment wearing faded hand-me-downs. She wears a structured midnight blue velvet dress, her dark hair braided with meticulous care and secured with a silver ribbon. She walks exactly as I taught her, keeping her chin leveled, her dark eyes scanning the room with a quiet, intelligent fearlessness. We are a unified front of absolute ruin for the people standing on that stage. A frontal tracking shot begins retreating smoothly down the central aisle, keeping us perfectly centered as we advance. The Sea of Atlanta elite parts instinctively before us. The movement is visceral. Wealthy socialites, politicians, and corporate titans step back, physically yielding the space. The slow-motion effect amplifies every micro-expression in the crowd. I see the exact moment recognition hits them. I see the whispered conversations igniting behind crystal champagne flutes. They see the undeniable facial resemblance. They realize the discarded, forgotten Washington daughter has returned, not crawling for scraps, but marching as a conqueror. the scent of expensive perfumes and roasted catering, is suddenly overpowered by the sharp, undeniable electricity of an impending execution. The camera snaps back to real-time speed, executing a harsh whip pan directly to Vivian. Her flawless matriarchal facade disintegrates in a fraction of a second. The carefully injected Botox and expensive fillers cannot hide the sheer primal terror seizing her features. The color rapidly drains from her face, leaving her looking gray and hollow beneath her dark velvet gown. This is her ultimate nightmare realized in front of the entire social registry. The daughter she buried in poverty to protect her own manufactured illusion is now walking through her exclusive gala, radiating a level of wealth and power Vivian can no longer fake. Vivian abandons the silver microphone. The sudden movement causes a sharp electronic feedback loop to whine through the ballroom speakers, a harsh screech that makes several guests flinch and cover their ears. She practically scrambles down the carpeted stairs of the main stage, her heavy gown tripping her up. She loses her regal glide entirely. She is a desperate, frantic woman, watching her carefully curated kingdom burn to the ground. "Where is security?" Vivian hisses, her voice cracking as she gestures wildly toward the heavy oak doors. She grabs the arm of a terrified event coordinator, her manicured nails digging deep into the fabric of his tuxedo jacket. "Who permitted this brat inside? I demand she be removed immediately. Call the guards right now. Get her out of my sight." The camera pivots to catch Jada and Connor. Jada steps forward, her custom silver-beaded gown suddenly appearing garish and theatrical next to the stark, elegant reality of my presence. She crosses her arms over her chest, attempting to project her usual bullying dominance. But her foundation is fundamentally cracked. She is still reeling from the silent humiliation of her declined credit cards in the Buckhead boutique earlier today. She sneers, her face twisting into a mask of ugly defensive arrogance, masking the deep-seated insecurity that has always driven her. "This is a private heritage event!" Jada snaps, her voice shrill and echoing uncomfortably in the vast, quiet room. "You have absolutely no right to be here, Kiara. You are embarrassing yourself in front of our guests." She turns sharply to her husband, striking his shoulder with the back of her hand. "Connor, call the security detail. Have them throw her out on the street where she belongs. Do something to fix this." The camera pushes in tight on Connor's face. He is physically deteriorating in real time. He does not see a jealous sister crashing a high society party. He sees the architect of his federal indictment. He is sweating profusely, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. His tailored midnight blue tuxedo suddenly looks like a straitjacket. He knows I did not put on an emerald gown and walk into this room just to ruin a speech. He knows exactly what was in the heavy leather briefcase I dropped on the federal agent desk. He is paralyzed by the absolute certainty of his own destruction, but driven by the sheer frantic instinct to maintain the illusion for just one more minute. He weakly raises his shaking hand, signaling to a pair of heavy-set private security guards standing near the catering exit. The guards step forward, their expressions serious and uncompromising. They are large men wearing dark suits with earpieces curled around their necks. They begin to move rapidly down the center aisle directly toward me and Nia. The crowd collectively holds its breath. The tension in the ballroom becomes a physical, suffocating weight, pressing down on every guest. Vivian stands at the bottom of the stage, breathing heavily, a triumphant, vicious gleam temporarily returning to her panicked eyes as she watches the guards approach me, ready to forcefully eject the problem she created. The slow motion effect engages once more as I stop walking. I stand dead center in the middle of the ballroom, directly in the path of the approaching security detail. I do not flinch. I do not take a single step backward. I gently squeeze Nia's hand, reassuring her, communicating silently that we are entirely safe. I look directly through the advancing guards, ignoring their bulk and their authority completely. I lock my gaze onto the table of honor situated right at the front of the stage. A sharp, resonant crack violently slices through the heavy silence of the room. It is a harsh wooden impact that stops the security guards dead in their tracks, causing them to hesitate and look toward the source of the noise. The camera whips away from the guards and snaps directly to the table of honor. Grandmother Constance has risen from her chair. She is an ancient, frail woman wrapped in vintage silk, but she possesses an iron will that single-handedly built the Washington Empire long before Vivian began squandering it on country club dues and fraudulent sons-in-law. Constance holds a heavy mahogany cane equipped with a solid brass handle. She lifts the cane and strikes the polished marble floor a second time. The sound echoes like a gunshot through the cavernous ballroom, commanding absolute total obedience from every single person in the room. The camera pushes into a tight, low-angle shot, framing Constance against the opulent backdrop of the weeping willow floral arrangements. Her sharp, intelligent eyes narrow as she glares at the security guards, freezing them in place with a mere look. She then shifts her penetrating gaze to Vivian, dismantling her daughter's false authority with a singular expression of deep, absolute disappointment. "Let the girl come up here," Constance commands. Her voice is raspy, textured by age, but it carries an undeniable, unyielding authority that fills the entire ballroom. It brooks absolutely no argument. It is the voice of the true sovereign overriding the panicked screeching of a failed regent. Vivian shrinks back, physically diminishing under her mother's gaze. Jada drops her arms, her sneer faltering into genuine shock. Connor looks at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I release Nia's hand for a moment and smooth the front of my emerald gown. I look at Constance, acknowledging her command with a slight, respectful nod. I take Nia's hand once more and resume my walk. The security guards step aside, lowering their heads deferentially. The tracking shot follows me from behind as I ascend the carpeted stairs of the stage, passing my trembling mother and my paralyzed sister without granting them a single glance. The velvet curtain has been drawn back completely, and the truth is finally standing in the light. I step onto the elevated platform, the heavy emerald silk of my gown sweeping gracefully across the polished wood floor. My grip on Nia's hand remains firm and reassuring. We take our place directly beside my grandmother. The camera immediately transitions into a flawless, continuous circular dolly track. It begins to orbit the four of us on the stage, moving with a deliberate, hypnotic fluidity that sharply contrasts the soaring heart rates of the people standing opposite me. As the lens revolves, it captures a raw, unfiltered study in psychological destruction. First, the camera glides past Constance. She stands tall, leaning slightly on her mahogany cane, her ancient face carved out of pure, unyielding granite. She is the undeniable anchor of the room. Next, the lens sweeps past Connor. He is actively dying inside his tailored midnight blue tuxedo. His breathing is shallow and rapid, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his neck are visibly spasming. He knows exactly what kind of danger has just walked into the room. Then the camera tracks past Vivian. Her carefully constructed matriarchal composure is completely disintegrating. Her chest heaves, her perfectly manicured hands trembling violently at her sides as she stares at me with a mixture of absolute hatred and primal terror. Finally, the lens settles on me. I am perfectly still. I do not glare. I do not smirk. I project the cold, absolute certainty of a woman who holds the executioner's axe. Constance steps forward and grasps the silver stem of the microphone. The ambient noise in the grand ballroom, which had been a low, chaotic buzz of confused whispers, instantly dies away. The hundreds of wealthy, influential guests, politicians, corporate titans, and legacy socialites stand frozen in place. They are captivated by the sudden, violent shift in the atmosphere. My daughter Vivian spoke to you all just moments ago about the future of the Washington legacy. Constance begins, her voice echoing through the massive speakers. Her tone is measured, precise, and entirely devoid of warmth. She spoke of modern markets. She spoke of the necessity of dynamic, visionary leadership to guide our family wealth into the next century. Her assessment of our current vulnerability was entirely correct. However, her proposed solution was catastrophically flawed. The camera continues its slow, relentless rotation, capturing the bead of cold sweat that breaks out along Connor's hairline. He takes a half step backward, instinctively trying to shrink away from the bright stage lights. The Washington Family Investment Fund was not built on aggressive posturing or speculative illusions. Constance continues her gaze, sweeping over the silent crowd. It was built on generations of hard labor, transparent accounting, and unyielding integrity. We do not hand the keys to our generational wealth to charming faces carrying empty portfolios. We do not reward systemic deception with an unearned promotion. A collective gasp ripples through the front tables. Beatrice DuPont, sitting directly in the center of the room, narrows her eyes sharply. The implications of Constance's words hit the wealthy investors like a physical strike. Connor's fraudulent veneer is being publicly, systematically stripped away by the most powerful woman in Atlanta. Jada, standing paralyzed at the base of the stage, covers her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with mounting horror. She looks at her husband, but Connor is entirely incapable of meeting her gaze. Therefore, Constance declares, her voice rising with unmistakable finality. There will be no new director of investments appointed tonight. That position is a luxury we can no longer afford. The current state of our family affairs demands something entirely different. It demands rigorous, unforced-applying accountability. It demands someone who can tear apart the lies and expose the bare mathematical truth. The camera pushes in on Connor. The word accountability hits him like a physical blow. His eyes dart frantically toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom. He is calculating the distance, measuring his chances of simply turning and sprinting out into the Atlanta night. But he is frozen, trapped by the crushing weight of hundreds of staring eyes. Effective immediately, I am restructuring the oversight of our entire financial network, Constance announces, turning her body slightly to face me. The camera locks onto her proud, unwavering profile. I am establishing a new mandate. I am appointing a new independent audit director of the Washington Family Trust. I am placing the absolute authority to investigate, freeze, and liquidate any and all family assets into the hands of a woman who possesses the exact forensic brilliance this family desperately requires. Constance reaches out and places her frail, steady hand over mine. I proudly introduce my granddaughter, Kiara Washington. The silence in the ballroom is absolute. It is a heavy, suffocating vacuum that lasts for 3 agonizing seconds. And then, the psychological dam holding back Vivian's terror completely obliterates. She snaps. "You have lost your mind!" Vivian screams, her voice tearing through the sophisticated acoustics of the ballroom with a raw, ugly ferocity. The camera whips violently away from me and snaps directly onto Vivian. She lunges forward, closing the distance between us. Her dark velvet gown twists awkwardly around her legs as she completely abandons decades of high society decorum. She points a trembling, accusatory finger directly at my face, her perfectly highlighted features twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "She is a failure!" Vivian shrieks, spit flying from her lips as she glares wildly at the audience. "You cannot listen to this. She is a ragged, pathetic single mother living in the slums. You cannot give her control of our money. She is a parasite." The elite crowd recoils, physically stepping back from the stage. Vivian is breaking the cardinal rule of their world. She is losing her composure. She is airing ugly, desperate grievances in the bright light of a formal gala. But Vivian is too far gone to care about the social fallout. She is fighting for her survival. "She dropped out of our world," Vivian screams, pacing frantically back and forth across the polished wood of the stage. "She drives a delivery truck. She is a nobody. Connor is a visionary. He is bringing us into the future. This little street rat is just trying to steal what is rightfully ours out of pure, bitter jealousy. She wants to destroy us because she could never be us." Connor realizes the catastrophic damage Vivian is causing. He steps forward, grabbing her arm, his fingers digging desperately into the velvet fabric of her sleeve. "Vivian, stop," he hisses. His voice a frantic, terrified whisper. "You are making it worse. Shut up." "Do not tell me to shut up!" she snarls violently, jerking her arm out of his grasp. "I pawned my mother's diamonds today to save you, Connor. I sold our heritage to keep your investors quiet. I will not let this ungrateful little failure walk in here and ruin everything I have built." The admission hangs in the air. The entire ballroom registers the statement. She pawned her mother's diamonds to pay his investors. The absolute truth of their financial ruin has just been broadcast through the microphone by Vivian herself. Beatrice Dupont stands up from her table, her face pale with sudden, furious realization. Constance strikes her cane against the floor one final time. The sharp crack echoes like a rifle shot, instantly cutting off Vivian's hysterical rant. "You are done speaking, Vivian." Constance says, her voice cold and completely devoid of maternal affection. "You have embarrassed yourself. You have disgraced this family. And you have willingly participated in the theft of our legacy. Step back." Vivian stands frozen, her chest heaving, her eyes darting between the horrified faces of her wealthy peers and the stone-cold expression of her mother. She realizes too late that she has just handed me the blade. I release Nia's hand, instructing her silently to stay beside Constance. I take 2 deliberate steps forward, closing the distance until I am standing directly in front of the microphone. The camera executes a slow, powerful push in framing my face against the dazzling, blurry backdrop of the crystal chandeliers. I look down at Connor and Vivian. I do not raise my voice. I do not need to. I am an independent forensic auditor, I state, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom, perfectly steady and razor sharp. And as my first official act as director of this trust, I am ordering an immediate, comprehensive freeze on all capital associated with Sterling Venture Capital Holdings. Connor's knees actually buckle. He stumbles, gripping the edge of the stage to keep from collapsing onto the floor. "The funds you invested are gone." I continue, addressing the crowd directly, specifically locking eyes with Beatrice Dupont. "Connor Sterling operates a fraudulent shell company. He has systematically embezzled millions of dollars using forged property deeds and fabricated yield reports to fund a lifestyle he could not afford. The dividends you received were stolen directly from the principal investments of the people sitting next to you. It is a textbook Ponzi scheme, and it is completely insolvent." Vivian lets out a strangled, gasping sob, covering her face with her hands as she finally collapses onto the floor of the stage, her velvet gown pooling around her in a dark, miserable heap. Jada is screaming now, crying hysterically at the bottom of the stairs, but her voice is entirely drowned out by the sudden, chaotic roar of the crowd. I look at Connor. His eyes are dead, utterly vacant. He knows there is no escape. I look toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom. I give a single subtle nod. The doors swing open. 24 federal agents wearing dark tactical jackets with FBI printed in bold yellow letters pour into the room. The blinding flashes of the paparazzi strobe lights illuminate the steel handcuffs hanging from their belts. The trap has officially closed. The federal agents immediately fan out across the perimeter of the grand ballroom. Their heavy tactical boots thud in unison against the polished marble floors, a stark military rhythm that shatters the delicate atmosphere of the gala. The heavy brass handles of the main oak doors are pulled shut and locked with a resounding thud. The exits are entirely secured. A wave of genuine panic ripples through the hundreds of assembled guests. Mayors, state senators, and legacy heirs suddenly realize they are not just spectators at a dramatic family feud. They are trapped inside a live, active federal crime scene. Constance remains seated at the table of honor. Her ancient face is carved out of pure, unyielding granite. She does not look surprised by the arrival of the authorities. She simply folds her hands, resting them on the brass handle of her mahogany cane, watching the execution of her legacy parasites with quiet, absolute approval. The camera pushes in, executing an extreme tight close-up on my right hand. I reach into the concealed silk pocket of my emerald gown and retrieve a sleek, solid silver USB drive. The polished metal catches the harsh glare of the stage lights. I move with deliberate, measured precision. I slide the drive smoothly into the main data port on the side of the podium media console. The massive digital projector screen suspended directly behind the stage hums with a sudden surge of electrical power. The Washington family heritage crest, which had been glowing proudly all evening, instantly flickers and dies. The ballroom is plunged into a momentary shadow before the screen ignites with a blinding high-definition clarity. A sprawling, meticulously detailed forensic financial schematic dominates the 50-foot display. It is a chaotic, terrifying web of aggressive red lines connecting dozens of offshore accounts, shell companies, and dummy corporations. The camera executes a rapid, merciless whip pan away from the screen, snapping directly onto Connor's face. The blood has completely abandoned his features. His skin is the translucent, terrifying color of wet ash. His jaw works soundlessly, his mouth opening and closing as he struggles to draw oxygen into his collapsing lungs. He recognizes the complex diagram instantly. It is his hidden ledger. It is the exact, highly classified digital map of his entire criminal existence, exposed in blinding light for the entire city to see. I lean forward, gripping the edges of the polished wooden podium. My voice cuts through the terrified ambient murmurs of the captive crowd, sharp and cold as a scalpel. What you are looking at is the true architecture of Sterling Venture Capital Holdings. I state my tone devoid of any inflection or sympathy. It is not a visionary hedge fund. It is not an incubator for modern technology startups. It is a textbook criminal Ponzi scheme operating entirely under the stolen shield of the Washington family name. I tap a small remote control resting on the podium console. The digital schematic zooms in, magnifying a specific cluster of transactions marked in bright, aggressive red ink. I direct your attention to the Series B funding round that closed exactly 6 months ago. I continue pacing my words with lethal, undeniable precision. Several of you sitting in this very ballroom contributed millions of dollars to that specific round. You were told your capital was being deployed into emerging green energy sectors and high-yield commercial real estate. That was a lie. I click the remote a second time. Animated red arrows shoot across the massive screen, connecting the incoming Series B capital directly to the outgoing dividend payments scheduled for the Series A investors. Your money was never invested, I declare, looking directly at a pale federal judge sitting near the center aisle. It was immediately diverted into a secondary holding account in the Cayman Islands. That stolen capital was then systematically drained to pay fabricated yields to earlier investors. Connor Sterling created a closed loop of continuous catastrophic fraud. He relied entirely on the aggressive acquisition of new money to prevent the old money from discovering that the vault was completely, utterly empty. The grand ballroom erupts into a chaotic symphony of outraged whispers. The camera glides over the faces of the city elite, capturing the exact moment their practiced masks of polite sophistication dissolve into sheer panic and fury. Beatrice Dupont stands rigidly at her table, her hands curled into tight, shaking fists. She stares at the screen, tracking the specific routing numbers that match her own fraudulent portfolio. She turns her furious, predatory gaze toward Vivian. Vivian is still sitting on the floor of the stage, her velvet gown pooled around her in a miserable heap, weeping hysterically into her manicured hands. The wealthy women of Vivian Elite Social Club, the very women she spent decades trying to impress physically, turn their backs on her. They lean their heads together, hissing in disgusted, condemning tones. The social execution is absolute. Vivian is no longer the Queen of Atlanta. She is an accomplice to grand larceny. But a Ponzi scheme requires constant forward momentum, I say, my voice dropping an octave, instantly commanding the room to quiet down once more. And 3 weeks ago, Connor momentum hit an impenetrable brick wall. The influx of new capital dried up. The fraudulent dividend checks were scheduled to bounce. He needed a massive, immediate injection of cash to keep the illusion alive. He needed an asset he could liquidate quietly and instantly. I tap the remote for the third time. The complex financial schematic vanishes from the screen. It is replaced by a high-resolution scan of a legal document. It is a warranty property deed for the Hawthorne townhouse. Connor targeted my private residence. I explain, my voice ringing with icy clarity through the speaker system. A property purchased entirely with my own independent funds. He fabricated a transfer of ownership, placing the deed under his and my sister's name. He found an offshore buyer willing to pay $3 million in untraceable cash. It was the perfect lifeline to save his sinking ship. I click the remote one final time. The screen splits perfectly down the middle. On the left side is the signature Connor submitted to the county clerk. On the right side is my actual authenticated legal signature drawn directly from multiple verified federal documents. The discrepancy is glaringly, humiliatingly obvious. The sharp, looping, aggressive angles of the forgery look absolutely nothing like my tight, precise, disciplined handwriting. There was only one fatal flaw in his desperate, pathetic plan, I state. Looking down at Connor, who is now visibly shaking, leaning heavily against the base of the stage stairs. The buyer required clean title insurance to close the cash transaction, and the insurance underwriters immediately flagged the mismatched signatures. Connor clouded the title with his own clumsy forgery. He locked himself out of the very asset he stole to save his life. I step away from the podium, moving to the very edge of the stage. The heavy emerald silk of my gown rustles against the microphone stand. I look directly down at the man who stood on my stone patio and mocked my poverty. Yesterday afternoon, Connor Sterling called me begging me to sign a property relinquishment authorization to clear the title. I tell the audience, ensuring every single person hears the pathetic truth of his downfall. He offered me $10,000 of my own stolen equity to sign away my family home so he could cover up his catastrophic crimes and avoid a federal indictment. I declined his generous offer. The murmurs in the crowd escalate into a deafening roar of absolute indignation. The realization that they have been sitting in a room drinking vintage champagne funded by a desperate thief breaks the final tether of high society restraint. Shouts of anger echo off the crystal chandeliers. Several wealthy investors push their chairs back aggressively, demanding answers, demanding the return of their stolen money. Connor realizes he is entirely out of options. The federal agents are moving steadily down the side aisles, closing in on the stage. The walls are physically compressing around him. The crushing psychological pressure shatters his remaining sanity. He completely snaps. He lunges forward, pointing a trembling, sweating finger up at me. His face is contorted with a feral, cornered desperation. "You are lying!" Connor screams, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, hysterical shriek that cuts through the angry roar of the crowd. "You fabricated all of this. You forged those documents. You hacked into my servers and planted those files." He turns wildly toward the angry crowd, holding his hands out in a pathetic, desperate gesture of innocence. "You cannot believe her," he begs, spittle flying from his lips, his chest heaving. "She is insane. She has always been jealous of us. She is a bitter, pathetic outcast who hates this family because she was never good enough to be part of it. She manufactured this entire presentation to destroy my reputation. Look at her. She is a nobody. I am a Sterling. I manage millions. I would never steal from any of you. You have to believe me. You have to believe me." His frantic denials echo painfully in the grand ballroom. He sounds like a child caught with his hand in the jar, desperately trying to convince his parents that the jar simply exploded on its own. The contrast is spectacular. I stand above him, bathed in the bright stage lights, wearing custom emerald silk, projecting the cold, immovable reality of mathematical fact. He stands below me, drenched in nervous sweat, his tuxedo wrinkled, screaming hysterical conspiracy theories, while the FBI moves in to place him in irons. The camera immediately shatters its static hold, transitioning into a rapid, violent tracking shot that shadows Connor as his primal fight-or-flight instinct completely takes over. He realizes the screaming is useless. He sees the tactical windbreakers of the federal agents closing in from the main aisles, their faces set in grim, determined lines. He spins around his patent leather shoes, slipping wildly against the polished hardwood of the stage. He abandons his wife. He abandons his mother-in-law. He abandons his entire fabricated existence in a fraction of a second, bolting toward the heavy velvet curtains, masking the stage-left exit. The Steadicam rushes after him, capturing the pathetic, frantic pumping of his arms. But he does not make it 3 steps. 2 massive federal agents step out from the shadows of the backstage wing, completely blocking his path. Connor slams on the brakes, his chest heaving violently. He pivots back toward the center of the stage, trapped like a rat in a glass box. The camera pushes in tight, locking onto my hands. I reach into the concealed silk pocket of my emerald gown. My fingers brush against the crisp, textured paper. I pull it out, holding it up so the harsh glare of the stage lights catches the green ink. It is the exact same $100 bill he had flicked at my feet on my stone patio just 48 hours ago. I step smoothly into his path, blocking his retreat. "You dropped this, Connor," I say, my voice slicing cleanly through the rising chaotic uproar of the ballroom. I flick my wrist. The $100 bill flutters through the air. The camera captures its slow, mocking descent as it hits him squarely in the chest and drifts down to rest on the toe of his expensive shoe. "2 days ago, you tossed that at me and commanded me to buy diapers for my daughter," I state, taking a slow, measured step forward. My eyes lock onto his terrified, vacant stare. "I am returning it. You should use it to call a lawyer. Though honestly, it will not do you much good. The absolute freeze on all your domestic and offshore assets, including your personal checking accounts, took effect precisely at 3 o'clock this afternoon. You cannot post bail, Connor. You cannot buy a cup of coffee. You are completely mathematically broke." The realization hits him with the force of a freight train. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The blood completely drains from his face, leaving him looking like a hollowed-out shell. The federal agents close in, grabbing his arms and violently twisting them behind his back. The sharp metallic click of ratcheting handcuffs echoes through the microphone, amplifying his ultimate humiliation across the grand ballroom. He sags against the agents, his knees giving out entirely, whimpering incomprehensible pleas as they drag his dead weight toward the exit. The camera whips instantly to Jada. She has heard every single word. The reality of my statement vaporizes her entire identity in a microsecond. She is not just losing her social standing, she is losing her money. Her husband is in handcuffs, being dragged away like a common criminal. Her luxury cars, her mansions, her endless shopping sprees are completely gone. The shock morphs into a visceral, unhinged rage. The polished socialite facade completely shatters, revealing the ugly, spoiled, vindictive child beneath. "You bitch!" Jada shrieks. It is an ear-piercing sound completely devoid of human dignity, a raw, guttural scream that tears through her throat. She kicks off her custom silver heels, sending them clattering across the floor. She lunges forward, scrambling up the remaining stairs of the stage. Her face is twisted into a mask of pure, feral hatred, her perfectly styled hair falling into her eyes. She aims straight for me, her manicured claws extended fully, intending to tear my face apart to physically destroy the woman who just dismantled her entire universe. I do not blink. I do not raise a hand to defend myself. I do not even shift my weight. I stand perfectly still, radiating absolute cold indifference. Before Jada can close even half the distance, the camera captures a blur of motion from the front row. 2 towering men in immaculate black suits step out from the shadows surrounding the table of honor. They are Constance's private elite security detail. They move with terrifying silent efficiency, anticipating the threat before it even materialized. One guard intercepts Jada mid-lunge. He catches her by the upper arms, twisting her momentum backward with brutal, effortless precision. She hits the wooden floor of the stage hard, her custom silver-beaded gown tearing audibly at the side seam. She thrashes, kicking her bare feet and screaming hysterically like a wild animal. But the guard pins her to the floor, locking her arms down with humiliating ease. "Let me go!" she shrieks, thrashing wildly against the guard grip, her makeup smearing across her face. "I will kill you, Kiara. I will ruin you. You are nothing. You are a mistake." Constance watches her eldest granddaughter writhing on the floor with absolute glacial disgust. The camera captures the profound coldness in the matriarch's eyes. There is no pity. There is no familial sympathy. There is only the harsh judgment of a woman watching a toxic weed being pulled from her garden. Constance leans heavily on her mahogany cane, her expression carved from stone as she watches the disgraceful display of entitlement being physically restrained. Vivian is still sobbing in a crumpled heap on the opposite side of the stage, her hands clutching her face as she watches her golden child get pinned to the floor by her own mother's security team. She reaches one trembling hand out toward Constance, a pathetic, silent plea for mercy, for intervention, for salvation. Constance does not even look at her. The ultimate humiliation is playing out under the blinding lights of the chandeliers, and Vivian is forced to watch every agonizing second of it. The ballroom has descended into total anarchy. The elite of Atlanta are out of their seats. The illusion of refined high society has collapsed into a frantic shouting mob. Beatrice DuPont is speaking rapidly into a cell phone, aggressively gesturing toward the stage, clearly instructing her legal team to immediately initiate a bloodbath against Connor Firm to seize any remaining scraps of capital before the federal government locks it down. Other wealthy investors are shouting demanding answers, shoving past the terrified waitstaff, causing silver trays of caviar and vintage champagne to crash onto the pristine crimson carpet. The jazz orchestra has completely abandoned their instruments, fleeing the ballroom in a panic. I stand perfectly still in the absolute center of the wreckage. The camera circles me one final time, capturing the stark, beautiful contrast. Connor has vanished, dragged out into the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers. Jada is pinned to the floor, screaming obscenities. Her expensive dress ruined her dignity, completely obliterated. Vivian is curled into a miserable sobbing ball, unable to face the society she sacrificed her own soul to impress. I look down at Jada as she continues to thrash pointlessly against the unyielding grip of the security guard. You always thought money made you untouchable. Jada, I say, my voice perfectly level, carrying just far enough for her to hear over the din of the panicked crowd. You thought cruelty was a substitute for intelligence, but you never had any real power. You only had illusions. And tonight, the illusions ran out. I turn my back on her, leaving her screaming furiously on the floor. I walk gracefully to the edge of the stage where Constance is waiting. I reach out and she places her frail hand over my arm. We look out over the chaos of the ballroom together, a united front of true Washington blood. The dynasty has been violently purged of its parasites. The rot has been meticulously cut out and burned away. It is messy, Constance says, her raspy voice barely audible over the shouting crowd, her eyes scanning the terrified, scrambling elite. But it was entirely necessary. You did well, Kiara. You brought the truth to the light. I nod, looking at the flashing blue and red lights now reflecting wildly through the massive glass windows of the hotel lobby. The vengeance is absolute. It is pristine and it is complete. I have successfully reclaimed my name, my legacy, and my daughter's future, and I have left nothing but smoking, scorched earth in my wake. The camera detaches from its steady, majestic hold on Constance and me, instantly adopting a controlled, deliberate, shaky cam style. This jarring kinetic motion throws the viewer directly into the visceral, unhinged panic of the room. Piercing red and blue strobes from the fleet of police cruisers outside slice through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel lobby. The harsh, rotating lights cast chaotic, sweeping shadows across the grand ballroom, illuminating the absolute destruction of the Sterling family. The heavy oak doors of the hall burst open for a second time. A senior FBI agent, flanked by another squad of heavily armed officers, marches straight to the center of the terrified crowd. He holds a crisp, formal warrant high in the air, his voice booming over a portable bullhorn to cut through the deafening hysteria. Connor Sterling is officially under arrest for 32 counts of federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and interstate grand larceny, the agent announces. His words echo like a death sentence. Through the lobby glass, the crowd watches as Connor is violently shoved against the hood of a cruiser, his rights being read into the cold Atlanta night. Hearing the catastrophic reality of the federal charges, the final sliver of Jada delusion shatters. She stops thrashing against the elite security guards and collapses entirely. Her knees buckle, and she hits the polished marble floor, letting out a hollow, agonizing wail. She grips the torn fabric of her ruined designer gown, sobbing uncontrollably as she watches her gilded, arrogant future vanish into the back of a police car. Simultaneously, the wealthy investors turn on Vivian like a pack of starving wolves. Beatrice DuPont leads the charge. An angry, suffocating mob of politicians, socialites, and hedge fund managers swarms Vivian. Their faces are twisted in ugly, demanding snarls as they scream for their stolen millions, aggressively waving their phones and empty portfolios in her face. They trap her against the edge of the stage, offering no mercy. Terrified and crushed under the weight of her furious peers, Vivian completely breaks. She drops to her hands and knees, abandoning decades of carefully curated matriarchal dignity. She crawls pathetically across the polished wood, dragging herself toward Constance. She throws her arms around my grandmother's legs, her manicured fingers digging desperately into the dark fabric of Constance's skirt. "Mother, please, you have to save me." Vivian begs, her voice a hysterical, choking gasp. "They are going to take everything I own. Write them a check, please. I am your daughter. Do not let them do this to me." The camera snaps to a tight, brutal angle on Constance's face. The red and blue police lights wash over her granite features, highlighting the deep, unyielding lines of her jaw. She looks down at the weeping, pathetic woman clinging to her legs. There is zero maternal warmth left in her eyes. Constance sharply steps back, violently breaking Vivian's desperate grip. She strikes the heavy brass tip of her cane against the floor. "You stopped being my daughter the moment you decided to finance your vanity with stolen money," Constance states, her voice echoing with lethal, absolute finality. "As of this exact moment, I am instructing my legal counsel to sever you from the Washington Family Trust. You are officially disinherited, Vivian. Every account, every property, every single cent of your legacy is permanently revoked. You will face these people and the federal government entirely on your own." I turn away from the stage, leaving the wreckage of my former family to the mercy of the federal agents. The camera drops low, tracking my deliberate, unhurried footsteps as I walk out of the grand ballroom and glide through the expansive marble lobby of the hotel. I move with a light, effortless grace, completely unburdened. As I step through the revolving glass doors into the cool night air, the camera pans smoothly to the right. It captures a chaotic feeding frenzy unfolding on the front steps. Jada and Vivian are completely surrounded by a swarm of ruthless paparazzi and aggressive local news crews. Microphones are thrust violently into their faces, while blinding camera flashes illuminate their ruined makeup. They shield themselves, weeping openly as reporters shout humiliating questions about the federal indictment. I do not stop to watch. I simply step into my waiting car and close the door. 3 days later, the sharp morning sun beats down on the pristine lawns of the Hawthorne townhouse. The atmosphere of absolute luxury is shattered by the flashing lights of two sheriff cruisers parked in the driveway. Uniformed deputies stand firmly on the front steps, strictly executing a court-mandated eviction order. The heavy mahogany front doors are propped wide open. Vivian and Jada stumble out onto the stone porch. They are not carrying matched sets of designer luggage. They are dragging cheap black plastic garbage bags bulging with whatever random clothes the deputies allowed them to gather. Jada looks hollowed out, her hair a tangled mess. Vivian is trembling violently, struggling under the weight of her trash bag. Parked across the street under the shade of a massive oak tree is Constance's customized black Maybach. I stand casually, leaning against the polished fender, my arms folded across my chest. Constance sits comfortably in the back seat, the tinted window rolled down just enough for her to watch the final act of this cleansing process. We observe them in absolute silence. Vivian spots me across the street. Desperation overrides whatever tiny shred of pride she has left. She drops her garbage bag on the pavement and stumbles over to me, her breath coming in ragged, pathetic gasps. "Kiara, please," Vivian begs, her voice a broken, desperate whisper. "The bank froze everything. We have absolutely zero cash. My friends will not even answer my calls. You cannot put us out on the street. Let us stay in the garage. Just the garage, Kiara, please. I will do anything." I look at the woman who spent my entire life making me feel completely worthless. I do not feel pity. I do not feel anger. I feel nothing but the clean, absolute finality of justice. I push myself off the fender of the Maybach and look her directly in the eyes. "You once told me that a homeless shelter is a place reserved exclusively for failures." I say, my voice perfectly calm and razor sharp. "I suggest you remember your own advice. Have a good night's sleep there, Vivian." I turn my back on her and slide into the plush leather seat beside Constance. As the luxury car pulls smoothly away from the curb, the camera lingers on Vivian and Jada, standing alone on the sidewalk surrounded by garbage bags utterly destroyed. The camera cuts from the bleak sunlit street directly into the warm, inviting embrace of the Hawthorne townhouse living room. The transformation is absolute. The sterile, pretentious decor that Connor had forced upon the space has been completely eradicated. In its place is a reflection of true quiet wealth and grounded peace. The chaotic ambient noise of sirens and shouting paparazzi is entirely gone, replaced by the soft, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock and the distant, joyful laughter of a child. The lens begins a slow, deliberate arc shot. It glides with a quiet, undeniable power, sweeping smoothly across the polished hardwood floors and the rich velvet upholstery. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling French doors, the camera captures the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the private back garden. Nia is running across the manicured grass, chasing a bright yellow butterfly. Her laughter is pure, unfiltered joy, completely untouched by the brutal corporate warfare that secured her future. The arc shot continues its hypnotic orbit, slowly revealing me seated in the center of the plush leather sofa. The heavy emerald gala gown is gone, replaced by a simple, elegant ivory cashmere sweater. I hold a crystal glass of deep red wine, resting it casually on my knee. I take a slow, measured sip, savoring the complex vintage and the absolute silence of my reclaimed sanctuary. There is no tension left in my shoulders. The armor I wore for decades has been permanently discarded. The camera finishes its sweeping rotation, pushing inward until it halts perfectly still in a tight, extreme close-up. The lens locks directly onto my eyes. They are calm, steady, and fiercely intelligent. I look straight down the barrel of the lens, piercing the fourth wall. I offer a small, genuinely confident smile. They say family is the place where the storm stops behind the closed door. I begin, my voice smooth, rich, and carrying the quiet weight of absolute victory. They tell you that blood is a shield against the harshness of the world. But sometimes your own family is the very storm that washes away everything you have. They are the hurricane tearing through your foundation. I take a slow breath, my gaze never wavering from the lens. If they look down on you and treat you like dirt, do not cry, I say, my tone dropping into a fierce, intimate whisper. Do not beg for their validation. Embrace it. Be the dirt. Quietly sink to the bottom, patiently settle into the dark, and wait. Let them build their fragile towers on top of you. And when the time is exactly right, you shift the ground and you completely bury their entire empire of arrogant illusions. I raise my glass slightly, acknowledging the audience watching this execution. Thank you for listening, I conclude, taking one final satisfied sip of the wine. I am Kiara Washington, and this is my real home. The screen fades to black.